welcome to Out of the Box Physical Therapy. I know I just so happened to miss the Transgender Day of Visibility, which was March 31st. This would have obviously been an even more appropriate video to post around that time. But it's really important to talk about this any day of the year. So today's going to be that day. Plenty of you, I'm sure, have treated patients who identify as transgender. Before you go and do an initial evaluation on a patient, one of the first things you look at is their medical history, which oftentimes is going to show evidence that perhaps that individual has transitioned from one gender to another. What now? How are you going to go forward? Oh my gosh. Okay, calm down. Quite frankly, you're not going to do things all that different with this patient as you would with any other patient. Biggest thing you need to ask yourself initially is if it's relevant to treating them. For example, are any operations that they may have had maybe contributing to something that they're coming to you for? Or maybe medications such as hormones, or are those things potentially going to be impacting what's going on and the types of treatments that you're going to be providing this patient? Once you realize you might have some questions to ask them, then of course I don't believe that you should feel afraid to do so. I mean, you want to take good care of this patient and have all the information you need to treat them to the best of your ability. But I do think you really need to consider this. Is it relevant to ask them questions about their transition? Is that truly relevant in optimizing their care with you? If it is relevant to ask them more questions about their transition or medications, etc., then please be sure that you're doing that in private, that you're not asking them those kind of questions in the open gym where other people might overhear. This is a really intimate and personal part of a person's life, and you don't want people to overhear that, and I know that many of those patients are not going to want other people to overhear evidence that they are transgender and that they have transitioned. These patients very likely went through quite the ordeal to transition, and I don't think you should take that lightly. I think you need to be really respectful to maintain their privacy and ask these questions in private so that they don't feel unsafe and that they feel like they are in a space where they can talk about those things without looking over their shoulder to see if someone is listening in on it. You might find that some patients are actually very open about it and don't have an issue discussing it, but that's not your call to make, it's theirs. I think it also might be important for me to quickly define gender dysphoria. That's essentially the distress that someone feels about their gender that was assigned at birth. In this case, the person's assigned sex and gender do not match the individual's gender identity, and therefore that individual is termed transgender. People who are transgender suffer from gender dysphoria oftentimes at levels of varying degrees, and some of them might not want reminding or referencing to those prior lives, and this is particularly true, I've heard, for people who have just transitioned or in those early stages of transitioning. I also have been told that it's really important to, of course, be respectful of the name that they want to be called by, regardless of what they may have had to put on their forms to sign a documentation before coming in for the evaluation. It's also incredibly important to not misgender someone or use the wrong pronouns or the wrong name when speaking to these patients. So that again is going to be something that quickly makes them feel unsafe in that space, and that's not something you want to do for any patient. So don't do it with this patient population either. Another point I really wanted to bring up in this video is to be really careful to avoid gossiping with coworkers about this patient population. I've found myself twice already where there was a patient in the clinic who identified as transgender, and someone found out about that piece of medical history, whether they were faxing forms or what have you, and they just couldn't keep it a secret. You know, and that really bothers me a lot. I mean, not only is that technically a violation of HIPAA, but that's such a personal and private piece of information to share about another patient to colleagues, especially since it wasn't relevant to their treatment or care in the clinic. It wasn't relevant, so why share that? Why just to talk about it? I will say I'm thankful, you know, no one in where I worked talked badly about these patients. They have no issues with transgender folk, but still privacy is privacy, regardless of whether you're talking well about it or not. It's not your place to bring up that kind of information about a patient with other coworkers just because. One of these patients I was mentioning previously that was talked about was actually one of my patients, and I developed a lot of trust and rapport with this patient throughout their plan of care, and they did really well, got better, all that, but even I never talked to them about it. I didn't find it to be relevant to what was going on with their case, and they didn't bring it up. I didn't feel a need to bring it up, and we didn't talk about it. This patient was a man. I saw him as a man. He saw himself as a man. Who knows what he went through to get to that point in his life. And it's not my place to remind him of his former life just to have a conversation. You know, if this patient had voluntarily brought up their story, I no doubt we would have had a conversation about it, and I'm sure it would have been a good one. But again, that's their place to share their story. It's not our place to draw that out of them just to talk about it. A lot of times these patients, they just want to be as they are. You know, they're coming to you, physical therapist, to treat them, and they don't necessarily want you talking about that part of their life. And quite frankly, I think we owe it to them as their healthcare professional to be very respectful of that, and to also maintain that privacy for them while we're caring for them. I am not transgender, but I'm really passionate about the privacy of patients, and particularly of a patient population that's already so vulnerable in society. So let's move forward trying to be more respectful for our patients who are transgender. Let's respect who they are, and let's maintain the privacy of their medical history. See y'all next time.